My name is Dan. I'm with the marketing team at Hasselblad, joining you from my home in the New York tri-state area. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Steve Goldsmith. Steve, if you want to join on in and say hello, along with Denny Semick over from Dodd Camera. Before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping notes, but Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are before we get to the fun stuff?
Thanks, Dan. So I am Steve Goldsmith. I am the Central States manager for Hasselblad. Based in Chicago. I cover the Central States, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast for Hasselblad. And I'm glad to join you today.
Very cool. If you're in for the first time with a Hasselblad webinar, we have a couple of just little housekeeping things. There are some visual components and audible components of today's presentation. So if you're joining by the dial-in number, encourage you to switch over to a desktop or tablet experience. And likewise, if at any point you get disconnected, just use the link that you received by email. If you've made it this far and you can't hear us yet, it happens a lot. Try and switch over the default computer speakers that you have set up in the control panel that you see towards the right. And don't worry if you have a microphone built in, it is muted by default. But we do want to hear from you. Over on the control panel towards the bottom, there's the question pane, and you're welcome to ask us questions as we go. Don't worry if it doesn't get answered immediately, though. We have a fair amount of people here with us today, and we may be addressing them on later in the presentation. Speaking of that presentation, we're glad to be hosting you today in conjunction with Dodd Camera, one of our excellent partners in the dealer network. Denny, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dodd?
Great. I'm Denny Semick. I'm professional sales at Dodd Camera, based out of our Cleveland corporate headquarters. Dodd's been around since 1891. We have a pretty long history, much like Hasselblad does. Looking forward to hearing the presentation, and I appreciate everybody showing up today. And big shout out to the Hasselblad guys for putting this on.
Very glad to have you, very glad to have you. And it is a bit of an interesting time, just in terms of accessing cameras and having them available. And as I understand it, Dodd does have some options when it comes to availability, as we know. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Currently, we're doing a curbside pickup at the 3 locations, Cleveland, Chicago, and Cincy. Starting the 12th, we will be doing, the retail stores will be open in Cleveland, Cincinnati. Chicago's lagging behind a little bit because of the stay-at-home orders.
Gotcha, very cool. Well, we encourage everyone to stay safe, and we're glad to have you along here for this engaging session. And to give you an idea of what we have on deck, we'll be starting first with just a brief history towards the X system cameras, kind of how we got to where we are today. And we'll spend a little bit of time in the neighborhood of what makes a Hasselblad, and some of the factors that really set us apart. And it comes down to a lot of the color science and optical technologies that we have built in. So when we're looking at what we're looking at today, it is about how the X1D 250C and the XCD lenses can really elevate what you're doing photographically and how they might expand the horizons of what you can do with a camera. So starting with the history, we begin in 1941 as a camera company, 1841, 100 years before that, as the family name in Scandinavia for photography. But our first camera is an aerial camera in World War II, commissioned by the Swedish military in the efforts of aerial photography. And in the post-war era, our founder, Victor Hasselblad, would recognize the need for a consumer camera that would combine higher image quality with medium format film whilst being modular and very portable. And 8 years after that first V system camera, we rolled forward to the 500C, which is ultimately one of our most popular cameras even today. And that camera would set forward a silhouette and a design aesthetic that we would carry forward well into the 20th and 21st centuries. And at that point, we'd continue evolving with a number of different formats and tools that would maintain Hasselblad standing as the professional tool of choice. In 2016, it was an interesting time for us. We rolled forward one of the most evolutionary tools in the past, 100 years with the X1D, the first version, and the first mirrorless medium format digital camera out there. And since it was so different, we honed down one really key goal. And the idea of X1D represents the ability to take medium format image quality in an incredibly compact design. And since that point in 2016, now in 2020, we've matured the product line into two models, X1D 250C and the 907X50C. We'll be speaking mostly to the X1D2. We encourage you to ask your questions if you've got them about the 907. And there are a number of similarities between the two models overall. Now, when we consider what the X1D system represents, it's growth in three key areas: image quality, precision mechanics, and design excellence. We'll be diving into each of these three areas and how we really excel, and ultimately what these mean for you and the advanced features that Hasselblad can offer you. Starting with image quality, X1D2, like all other Hasselblads today, it is a medium format camera. In general, people draw most comparisons between a medium format camera towards a full frame camera or 35 millimeters. So full frame being roughly the 24 by 36 field of view or frame area. X1D2 uses a 50 megapixel 33 by 44 millimeter sensor. So right off the bat, we have a 60% larger image area than full frame. Naturally, there's a bit of a reverse crop factor. It's about 0.8x, where typically people are used to doing an additive multiplication factor. Our lenses basically see wider because we have a larger image area. Now, with a larger sensor at 50 megapixels, we naturally have a larger pixel. And what does that lend us? Well, first, a larger pixel sees more light. By having a larger area on the sensor that's able to receive light, it translates into more data and less noise, or more usable data and less unusable information. So inherently, larger pixel, more data. When we take into consideration what that translates into for a tangible image, we separate it into color and light. Starting with light, we describe this typically as dynamic range, and this is simply the amount of information from shadow to highlight. Now, typically with most professional cameras, you'd expect a dynamic range of 10 to 12 stops, meaning that from the darkest shadow area to the brightest highlight area in a single image, you're going to see about 10 to 12 camera stops of light. Now, what's really neat is that X1D2 averages 14 stops between shots. So in the typical range of exposures that we use as a test bench, we're receiving or averaging 14 stops of dynamic range. Now, that's a number. How does that translate to practical use? Well, an image like this is a great example. We have a subject in relatively dark attire, but she's mostly backlit, along with some very high key or high brightness areas around her. And admittedly, we are presenting on the web, and the compression here is absolutely brutal. So I do encourage you to hop on over to hasselblad.com after the webinar to check out some of the sample images that we have online in full resolution. What's really neat, though, is in this example, in the dark area of the attire, what's typically lost to shadows, it typically gets blocked up in the image, we're still able to discern detail. And likewise, in the brightest part of the image, in the highlight area, we're able to pull out levels of detail that we would typically lose with another camera that has a lower or smaller inherent dynamic range. And with this, we're doing less post-processing. We have less of a need for HDR processing because the camera natively has a larger dynamic range. So that's brightness. Let's move on to color. Now, color perception is admittedly, it's very objective. It varies from person to person. It goes by age, color deficiency, inherent color blindness. But that being said, Hasselblad's been working in digital technologies and specifically translating analog to digital for the past 30 plus years. And in that time, we've come up with a really well-balanced solution that offers photographers the greatest latitude in color rendition. And basically, we're trying to give you, the photographer, as much information as possible. So using the image here as an example, it's got a simulation or simulated processing with standard RGB. It's what you could expect out of a camera without any processing whatsoever. That being said, even at the raw recording format, or even at the stage of writing a raw file, most manufacturers do a bit of image optimization, and they do a bit of tuning in the camera. So even though you're writing a raw file, you're still doing a little bit of manipulation in the camera. And this is a tricky spot to be in, simply because at this stage, you're basically applying what the manufacturer says is good color, is an optimal set of tones. So they may drive a certain color channel, like more green so the grass looks greener, or more blue so the sky looks bluer. We're of the opinion that that's not our place to make that decision for you. And that solution for us is by way of, well, the Hasselblad natural color solution. It's the idea that we're not here to give you a specific set of colors that we deem good or bad. Basically, HNCS, the Hasselblad Natural Color Solution, it's a color space that's embedded into our raw file format and an image processing algorithm in our software. So these two components in hand are designed to give you a very natural image that's never too saturated or contrasty. The gradations between tonal information and color information is very nuanced. And while the kind of general look is that the image is very flat and very desaturated, it's simply because we've not overdriven it in the camera. And because of that, we're giving you as much fidelity and as much information as possible with a single file for you to run with. So wrapping up image quality, or to recap it, basically we start with a larger sensor, significantly larger sensor than what we compare to full frame. And inherently with a larger sensor at 50 megapixels, you're getting a larger pixel. That larger pixel is able to achieve a wider dynamic range thanks to its better ability at recording light or usable data rather than noise. And with that color process, we're working with the Hasselblad Natural Color Solution that is never oversaturated, never over the top. So with that, I'd like to throw out a poll to the room. Let me tab over there. And just to get an idea of how many of the folks attending today have ever shot with a medium format camera. So we'll throw that poll out there, and just in preparation of the next steps, to give you an idea while you're filling out that poll, we'll be talking about the precision mechanics and what goes into making a Hasselblad a Hasselblad. Let me hold just for a little bit longer as those results come in. Very cool. Still have a couple trickling in. All right. Looks like the majority of people have shot medium format film and digital, a couple just film, a couple just digital. Very cool. It's great to know that about you. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But for now, let me pass it over to my colleague, Steve, who's got more information about the precision mechanics of X1D2.
And where Dan left off, we're talking about the quality of the X1D. X1D features a lightweight metal construction, durability that is designed for both portability and travel. It's a great camera to go out in the field with and take along with you. Each camera is meticulously put together and checked in our factory in Gothenburg. That's the same factory and location that we've been building cameras in for nearly 80 years. So in short, we design a camera to instill confidence so that when you pick it up, it just feels right in your hand. The ergonomics are designed to inspire you. It's just a wonderful camera to walk around with and shoot with. The same thought process also goes into our lenses. Like the X1D, all of our XCD lenses feature an all-metal construction in the body and the performance that you would expect from a Hasselblad product. Mechanically, all of the XCD lenses feature a leaf shutter. A leaf shutter or central shutter is a series of blades that open and close much like the diaphragm does in your lens. Having a leaf shutter across all of the XCD lenses gives you a distinct number of key advantages. First, by having the central shutter, we're able to make the camera body smaller. By not having to have a focal plane shutter or a curtain moving within the body, we can reduce the thickness of the camera by not having that mechanism built into the camera. So it's a thinner camera, smaller and lighter weight than other cameras might be. The next thing we build into the cameras is accuracy. The leaf shutter has been in use for about 100 years or so, and it's found in all of the Hasselblad lenses, both the X lenses and the H lenses. And by being mechanically more reliable, it gives you consistent results from exposure to exposure, and you know you can trust the image quality produced by our lenses. Last thing I want to talk about regarding the lenses, and possibly my favorite feature, is exposure flexibility that the leaf shutter will give you when you're working with flash, particularly working with flash outdoors. As an example, this image here was created with a focal plane shutter camera, typical flash exposure, ISO 100 f16, and the flash sync speed of 125th of a second, which would be the max speed on most focal plane cameras. Because of that, we're not able to expose both for the motorcycle, the grass, and the sky. You can see the sky is blown out, and unfortunately, as Dan mentioned earlier, internet compression may be adding a little bit to that, but the sky is blown out. So we've got a decent exposure for the bike and a decent exposure for the grass, but the sky is blown out. A leaf shutter would allow us to use flash at any native speed that the camera supports, all the way up to 1/2000 of a second. So the same shot taken with the X1D and its leaf shutter gives us the ability to expose the entire image. So we see that the sky is not blown out by able to reduce the overexposure in the sky by bringing the shutter speed up. So it gives us a lot more flexibility when you're using flash outdoors. So a key advantage to the leaf shutter or central shutter. Again, all of the lenses that we make for Hasselblad have that, from the 21 millimeter all the way down to our 130 millimeter lens with the 17X. They embody the ultimate in build quality construction. Each of them excel in their own ways. A couple of my favorite lenses would be the 21. The XCD 21 is a great wide angle lens, ultra wide angle lens. It's about equivalent to a 17 millimeter lens on a full frame DSLR. It's a great lens for shooting interiors or architectural stuff when you don't have a great amount of space to work in. It's great for tight spaces. It gives you a very expansive look and field of view with nearly infinite depth of field because it's such a wide angle lens. Our newest lens, the XCD 45P, is we went from ultra wide now to ultra compact. It's the smallest lens I think we've ever made. It's a really sharp lens and it's incredibly quiet. It's virtually silent. It's a great lens to mate with the X1D2 and just use it as a walking around lens, walking around for street photography or a travel lens, because it's so small, so compact and quiet. It's one of my favorite new lenses. And then I think my all-time favorite lens is the XCD 81.9. It's the fastest lens we've ever made, and I think it's the fastest medium format lens on the market today. The 1.9 aperture gives this lens excellent use as a portrait and headshot length image with the ability to really take that background out of focus at the 1.9 aperture. So last week we come to the design excellence. We believe that the X1D is a fully encompassing experience, meaning that when you interact with the camera at each step, it's been carefully thought out. First, in using the camera, you'll find that virtually everything is well laid out on both the 3.6-inch rear touchscreen and the large high-res EVF on the camera. As far as controlling and navigating, it's a touchscreen interface, so you can use the intuitive touch design. All the menus and controls and parameters of the camera can be adjusted using a tap or a swipe and pinch and pull. So if you're familiar with using an iPhone or an Android phone or a tablet, the operation of the X1D should be second nature. Now, we didn't forget those of you that may not like using a touchscreen, so all the features are available to you as a button press or as a dial as well. So if you're shooting outdoors when it's cold and you've got gloves on, you can still navigate and control the camera via the button and dial interface on the camera. So you can use either the touchscreen interface or the mechanical interface as well. One other thing is as part of the design experience for the X1D, we not only took into account how you create the images, but what you do with them afterwards. And while we do have applications for Mac and PC, we've got Focus Desktop. The XCD X1D2 is the first camera that we've made to offer tethering to an iPad Pro. So in the field, you can tether to your iPad Pro either via USB 3 connectivity or more importantly, via Wi-Fi. First camera to allow us to tether directly to an iPad Pro via Wi-Fi. It allows you to import, edit, and export images, and it's all working in the full RAW file. So the actual 3FR RAW file is being transferred to the iPad Pro via Wi-Fi or USB 3 on the fly, and then you can take that image and work with it within the iPad OS, or you can export them out and work on them in any other application you want. But it's a first for working with a full raw file on the iPad Pro. We've got some additional events that are coming up that may take you into these topics in a little bit greater depth. We have a webinar coming up on May 5th that goes into Focus. And then May 12th, we've got a webinar that goes into Focus Mobile 2. So lots of opportunities for you to learn more about the image processing applications that we offer. So I think, Dan, you've got a little bit more to say about our X1D system.
I sure do. Before we get to that, I just have some curiosities about how many of y'all have tried mobile editing before. It's a pretty exciting perspective, you know, just being able to use an iPad to edit the photo. So I'm curious as to seeing how many of you already have it part of your workflow, or maybe are considering it for down the road, or if it's, you know, just not your jam. Very cool. Getting some of the answers here. It looks like a couple of folks have just tried it to start. Some folks are interested, and appreciate the honesty for some of y'all just not being interested in editing on an iPad. That's a fair place to be. We'll touch more on the future events as well. Definitely a lot of interest there and what we can learn. Let's see here if I can start sharing my screen again. Go and close that poll real quick. Awesome. Very cool. All right, so let's just recap everything with a quick summary here. And when we talk about X1D, we talk about first image quality, and that starts with the inherently larger sensor. And that larger sensor lends us a larger pixel, which helps us with dynamic range, average of 14 stops between shots, and really complemented by Hasselblad's natural color solution. That's both in the camera and in our software. So these separate parts coming together to get you really natural, nuanced color tonality, never oversaturated, never too contrasty. Next is the precision mechanics of the Hasselblad X system. It starts with all metal construction, and the cameras and the lenses. I actually saw a great question in the question and answer pane about where the weight of the lenses comes from. And a lot of it is building a system that gives you the flexibility and also gives you the confidence when you pick it up. So we're really designed to a professional standard. And ultimately it comes down to when you pick up the camera, does it instill confidence? And with the lenses, it also means that the optical designs that we're implementing, we're using the highest level of both theoretical and physical optical design to ensure that all of the lenses that we're producing for the X system take advantage of every piece of technology that we can. And that's really interesting because when you look at the X system, they're really record-setting lenses. The 21 is our widest ever. The 80 is our fastest ever. The 45p is the smallest ever for Hasselblad. And it's really being able to take advantage of a completely new platform. All of the lenses, though, using what we've learned and what we know about professional photography, and using a central shutter system that gives you the flexibility of leaf shutter and the exposure flexibility, especially when you're working with flash. And finally, it's about the designed experience, thinking about how you're going to interact with the camera. It first starts with the handling, just picking the camera up and navigating around it with a very touch-driven interface. That being said, there's still physical touches. There's still hard buttons and mechanical control dials if you prefer that, but it's about an interface and kind of a way of interacting with the camera that is very intuitive to the way that we communicate today. And speaking of communication, it's the idea of sharing images and having flexibility in handling those images. So when it comes to the editing and getting images out of the camera and out into the world, there's an even easier way thanks to the Focus Mobile 2 solution and the iPad Pro. So the ability to capture that higher level of image editing on a more portable form factor. And as Steve mentioned, we do have another webinar coming up. Starting next week, we'll be talking about the Focus software family, and then the week following, really diving into the mobile editing solutions. So if you're curious to learn more, in the handout section, we have a couple of documents provided for you today. The first is, of course, the brochure that goes over all of the X system lenses and the X1D2, and really the options that are out there when it comes to our mirrorless medium format solution, along with a handout that has really great links to product videos, more information about the individual lenses, a link to our online calendar where we have a number of online events coming up, and some great stories and videos, including our current Inspired with Hasselblad campaign, which is profiling a number of photographers out in the world who are taking the challenges that we have at hand today and creating some really beautiful work. So really definitely encourage you to check that handout section, and then a data sheet that gives you the full rundown of everything that you could want to know about the X1D. And if you want to try it out, or if you're curious about making that next step, definitely, again, reach out to our friends at Dodd. After this webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email with some more contact information in terms of how you can contact us and where you might want to reach out to if you want to learn more about the X1D and any of the XCD lenses, whether you're coming from a different camera system or you haven't even shot medium format digital before. We're here to support you and help you out in terms of any questions that you might have. So speaking of questions, if I can get Steve and Denny to join me again, we'll jump to a couple of the questions that we've got over. But while I'm pulling it up, Denny, could you tell us or remind us about how folks can follow up with you and where they can learn more?
Sure, Dan. You can be reached at doddcamera.com is our website. We do have some of the X1Ds in stock and a limited selection of lenses. Also, our three main stores, Cleveland, Chicago, and Cincinnati, they all three have rental departments. We've got cameras and lenses available in rental too. So that's just another way to test the camera out. And there's special programs if you purchase it after you rent it. We refund the rental fees and that kind of thing. But there's one more thing I'd like to share. As a salesman, I have access to a lot of different cameras to play with. Frequently, I take the X1D with me when I go on the road for 2 weeks because it's just a pleasure to use. So I thought I'd throw that out there for you as well.
Definitely, really appreciate it. I think it's always important for the people selling the camera to get real hands-on time with it, and thankfully, we're excited about the camera and we're really excited to get into your hands. So we'll start with a couple of the questions. Let's see here. I have a question from Jeffrey about weather resistance. And Steve, could you speak to what we've got built into the camera to address that?
Sure, Dan. So at points of entry on the camera, we do have seals. So around the battery, there's an O-ring seal. The doors on the side of the camera have seals on them. And then on each lens, there's a ring that goes around that mates to the body. So the camera is pretty weather sealed. I don't know that I would take it out in a downpour, but in a mist and slightly inclement weather, I believe it would perform adequately.
Very cool, very cool. I have a question from Steven on the trade-off. So if I'm tethering to an iPad versus using our Focus desktop software, well, I don't want to spoil our webinar next week. Steve, do you mind answering that one?
So a couple features today. So if you're connected to the desktop applications, you have live view on the desktop application right now. That's a feature that's not yet enabled in Focus Mobile 2. The tool set is greater on the desktop application than it is on the iPad Pro. For us to throw every tool that the desktop application had into a touchscreen interface just wouldn't be physically possible to do. You'd just be scrolling around from tool to tool to tool. So while you have the basic tools that you need to get the image to where you want to be within the iPad Pro, it's just the expanded great set of tools that the desktop application has, is a big difference.
Awesome. Have a question from Robert about the crop factor between 6x6 and the full frame. Since we have, well, first, before we get too far, we have lens adapters, right, Steve?
Boy, do we have lens adapters. We make the XH adapter that lets you put your H lenses on the X1D, and depending on the vintage of those H lenses, newer lenses and all the lenses that have the orange square on them will give you 1/2000th of a second and autofocus. Older lenses without the orange square, depending on their vintage, may be able to be firmware upgraded to give you autofocus. Unfortunately, older lenses, because of the technology needed and the reprogramming of them, are not able to give you autofocus, but they do give you full control and use of the central shutter, which is a key feature of our lenses, as we talked about. We also make an X to V adapter that lets you use your V lenses. So your C, your CE, CF, CFI lenses, the ones that were designed for the 500 series camera, 200 and 2000 series, they can all be used. Now you'll be using the electronic shutter with those lenses built into the X1D, and that will limit you in some ways, but still gives you full usability and functionality of the lenses you bought 20, 30, 40 years ago. Let me make an adapter for those of us that love the X-Pan. We have an X-Pan adapter to let you put the lenses for the X-Pan on there, the 45 millimeter lens and 90 millimeter lens. They all work really well. And it just allows you to expand upon the system. So the nice thing is, once you bought into the Hasselblad family, we let you keep using the gear that you bought. We never make it obsolete. So yeah, we have lens adapters, Dan.
Love to hear it. Robert, you're asking about the 40 mil lens, hopefully the FLE, that's one of my favorite or V system lenses, and what the equivalent is. So 40 mil, which is like 24, 28 on 6x6, it's closer to about 30, 33, 35 millimeter on the X1D. So a bit of reverse crop factor, because we do have, well, not reverse crop factor, regular crop factor, because the 33 by 44 mil sensor is smaller than the 6x6 image area. So with the 40, it's still a wide angle, but not as wide as you would see it on the 6x6. Jeffrey, is a great question. Is the sensor really hard to keep clean in the field? It's a large sensor. It is a mirrorless design. That being said, I travel with a rocket blower. It gets some weird looks when I was flying with the TSA, but just a little puff of air helps clean it out. And then if it's got some real gunk, we definitely can help you out in terms of cleaning it. Or I'm fairly sure that the friends at Dodd can help you clean your sensor. Is that right, Denny?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome, very cool. Got some questions about the zoom lens. Definitely an anticipated lens, and it sounds like we have a couple of folks who already have it on order. Steve, when's that in the works?
That zoom lens is shipping, small quantities, but it is shipping, and those that have received it absolutely love the lens. The reports I've gotten back and the reviews I've read is that it's incredibly sharp at all focal lengths, and it's a well-balanced lens as well. It's a great lens to if you're going to travel, just to throw that on there, and you've got the full range from 35 to 75. So they are shipping, but in small quantities right now.
Gotcha. I have a question about the external flash. What do we recommend for like a hot shoe flash option?
So the hot shoe is Nikon TTL compliant. So Nikon SB910, I believe, is fully supported. Right. Nikon flashes that follow the Nikon flash protocol and adhere to that 100% should be supported and give you TTL exposure on the X1D2.
Very cool, very cool. I have a question about the focus assist. So if I'm using adapted lenses or manual focus, what are my options in terms of, is there like focus peaking, or how can I help my very tired eyes to help focus?
So the camera has focus peaking built in, which is a great assist. You can choose the color, 1 of 5 colors, to give you the highlight in focus peaking. You also can do a zoom feature where we zoom into 50% or 100% to help you get the critical focus. Now with the H lenses, you'll have focus peaking. If you want to use the zoom function, you'll have to manually push the button to zoom in and out. With XCD lenses, if you have it set to manual focus, as soon as you turn the barrel, if you've got it set to the auto zoom, it'll automatically zoom in for critical focusing. But on the H lenses, you'll have to just tap a button on there or tap the screen to go into the zoomed feature for critical focusing.
Very cool, very cool. We'll just take a little bit more time for 1 or 2 more questions on the focus assist features. I'll actually, one of my favorite tips and tricks on the camera I've got here, you can actually reassign these top 2 buttons and then this front depth of field preview button that's under my ring finger. So what I'll do is actually assign it to image magnification, and as soon as I tap it, it jumps in from the field, from the wide view all the way up to 100% magnification. So it really helps critical focusing. Also had a question about this lens, the 45p, and why we don't include a lens hood. Basically, we designed the lens to be as compact as possible, and a lot of it was building this little recess. So on the other X lenses, if you already own a couple, you'll know that there's a bit of a little lip for a bayonet. But because we wanted it to sit flat and have the lens as compact as possible, we had to allow it to sit flush when it's focused at infinity there. And so there's no dedicated lens hood, but it uses a 62 mil filter. So really any of the third-party options out there in terms of just a thread-on lens hood, you can definitely use. And you know exactly where I'll go to find a 62 mil lens hood. Our friends over at Dodd Camera. There's the plug there. Let's see. We've got a Leica user. It's okay. We welcome all types. We're not going to judge you too hard. That's using a 35 mil, typically on an M6, so full frame. Love that camera. Not a bad choice. What would be the equivalent on an X1D for 35 mil? Steve or Denny, first to hit.
That'd be the 45, either the 45P or the 45-32, both in the 35 millimeter range for equivalency.
Yeah, we'll say, so we get a lot of questions of why we have two 45 mil options, and it comes down to preference. So 45 3.2, it's a focus by wire design, so it's a little bit more accurate down to the level of encoding on the lens itself, and it's of course a little bit more light receptive. But the 45P, which I've got on this camera here, it's incredibly compact. It's actually smaller than a lot of 50 mil lenses that you'll find on full frame. And so if your combo is rangefinder with 35 2.8, I think X1D2 and a 45P is everything you could want there in all of the best of medium formats. So definitely encourage you, Darcy, to follow up with our friends at Dodd, try the camera out, and really start to fall in love with X1D. Have a lot of love flowing in from people who are just using an X1D and really enjoying it. And we hope that you're staying safe and creative in this unique and interesting time. We're here to help you out, answer your questions, and give you as much information as we can that helps fuel you creatively. Another point of opportunity with our Inspired with Hasselblad campaign, if you're doing creative and interesting things with your X1D or any Hasselblad camera, we want you to share them with hashtag Inspired with Hasselblad. And we're looking for people who are doing some just fun stuff and really exercising that part of the brain to stave off the insanity of being home all day. With that, I'll wrap it up. Danny, one more time, if people want to follow up and try out the X1D or want to play with it, where can people reach you?
They could send an email to dsemic@doddcamera.com or go to our website, doddcamera.com, and fill out the form, and it'll get to my desk.
Very cool. And then we'll have your email, of course, so people can click on that in the follow-up email and watch this as a recording. Same thing for Steve. If you have any questions, we'll make sure that we'll connect you with him and any curiosities that you've got. One last time, I want to thank you for joining us today. If we didn't get to your question, don't worry, we'll be following up after the fact. And thank you for joining us. Again, check out the handout section for upcoming events, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.